What if the biggest threat to your financial future isn't a stock market crash, a recession, or even inflation? What if the real danger is something much bigger, something building quietly in the background while most people are focused on day-to-day headlines? According to legendary investor Ray Dalio, America may have entered what he calls a dangerous phase in its economic cycle. This isn't about panic. It's about understanding the signals that history has shown us again and again. And if Dalio is right, the decisions being made today could shape the financial future of millions of Americans for years to come. To understand why America may be entering a danger zone, we first need to look at debt. Debt by itself is not necessarily bad. Families use debt to buy homes. Businesses use debt to expand operations. Governments use debt to invest in infrastructure and national priorities. The problem begins when debt grows faster than income and becomes increasingly difficult to manage. Over the last several decades, the United States has accumulated enormous amounts of debt. As borrowing continues and interest costs rise, a larger portion of government resources must be used simply to service existing obligations. This creates pressure on budgets, limits flexibility, and raises difficult questions about long-term sustainability. Dalio often talks about what he calls the big cycle. Throughout history, great nations rise, become prosperous, accumulate wealth and power, and eventually face challenges caused by excessive debt, internal conflict, and changing global conditions. This pattern has appeared repeatedly across centuries. While every nation is unique, Dalio believes there are common indicators that appear before major economic transitions. One of those indicators is a debt burden that becomes increasingly difficult to support without significant consequences. Another factor contributing to America's danger zone is the growing gap between government spending and government revenue. When spending consistently exceeds income, deficits expand. Those deficits must be financed through borrowing. Over time, larger borrowing requirements can place pressure on financial markets. Investors begin paying closer attention to whether future growth will be strong enough to support the increasing debt load. If confidence weakens, borrowing costs can rise further, creating a cycle that becomes increasingly difficult to control. At the same time, many Americans continue to feel pressure from the cost of living. Even when inflation slows from previous highs, prices often remain elevated. Housing, healthcare, insurance, education, and everyday necessities consume a larger share of household budgets than many people expected just a few years ago. For families trying to save, invest, or prepare for retirement, these rising costs create significant challenges. Economic data may show growth, but individual experiences can tell a very different story. The housing market provides another example of these pressures. For many Americans, owning a home has long represented financial stability and wealth creation. However, higher mortgage rates and elevated home prices have made affordability a serious concern. Young families and first-time buyers often find themselves facing difficult choices. Some postpone homeownership entirely. Others stretch their finances further than they would prefer. When a large portion of the population struggles to access housing, the broader economy can feel the effects. Dalio has also warned about the relationship between interest rates and debt. When debt levels are relatively low, rising interest rates may be manageable. But when debt levels are already extremely high, even modest increases in borrowing costs can have significant consequences. Governments, businesses, and consumers all feel the impact. Interest expenses rise. Investment decisions become more difficult. Growth can slow as more money is directed towards servicing debt rather than creating new opportunities. The bond market plays a critical role in this discussion. While many people focus on stock prices, Dalio often emphasizes the importance of bonds. Government bonds help finance public spending and serve as a foundation for the financial system. When investors demand higher yields to compensate for perceived risks, borrowing becomes more expensive. This dynamic can influence everything from mortgage rates to corporate financing costs. As debt levels increase, the bond market becomes an increasingly important signal to watch. One reason Dalio's warnings attract attention is because they are rooted in historical analysis rather than short-term predictions. He studies how societies have responded to similar challenges in the past. History shows that excessive debt rarely disappears on its own. Instead, nations typically face difficult adjustments. These adjustments may involve slower growth, inflationary pressures, spending reductions, higher taxes, monetary changes, or some combination of all four. The exact path varies, but the underlying challenges often remain similar. Another concern involves wealth inequality. Over recent decades, financial assets have appreciated significantly. Individuals who own stocks, real estate, and businesses have generally benefited from these trends. At the same time, many workers have struggled to keep pace with rising costs. As wealth becomes increasingly concentrated, social and political tensions can grow. Dalio frequently highlights this issue because economic stability depends not only on financial markets, but also on social cohesion. Technology presents both opportunities and risks. Artificial intelligence is transforming industries, improving productivity, and creating new possibilities. Investors have poured enormous amounts of capital into AI-related companies. While innovation can drive long-term growth, Dalio has suggested that excitement around emerging technologies sometimes leads markets to become overly optimistic. History is filled with examples where revolutionary technologies created real value but were accompanied by speculative excesses. Distinguishing between genuine opportunity and unrealistic expectations is never easy. Global competition adds another layer of complexity. The United States remains one of the world's most powerful economies, but it operates within an increasingly competitive international environment. Nations compete for investment, technological leadership, manufacturing capacity, and strategic influence. Changes in trade relationships, geopolitical tensions, and supply chains can all affect economic performance. Dalio often emphasizes that economic strength and geopolitical strength are closely connected. The danger zone is not necessarily defined by a single event. Rather, it is the combination of multiple pressures occurring simultaneously: high debt levels, rising interest costs, affordability challenges, wealth inequality, geopolitical competition, and changing technological landscapes all interact with one another. Individually, each challenge may be manageable. Together, they create a more complicated environment that requires careful decision-making. For investors, this environment raises important questions. Traditional assumptions may not always work as expected. Diversification becomes increasingly important. Risk management becomes more valuable. Understanding how different asset classes perform under various economic conditions can help individuals make more informed decisions. Dalio has long advocated for balanced portfolios that are designed to withstand a wide range of possible outcomes, rather than relying on a single economic forecast. One of the most important lessons from Dalio's work is that cycles eventually change. Periods of prosperity can create the conditions for future challenges, while difficult periods often create opportunities for renewal. History is not a straight line. Economic systems adapt, policies evolve, businesses innovate, individuals adjust their behavior. The future is rarely as simple as either extreme optimism or extreme pessimism suggests. This perspective is particularly relevant because fear often dominates public discussions during uncertain periods. Headlines focus on worst-case scenarios. Social media amplifies dramatic predictions. Yet history also shows that societies possess remarkable resilience. Challenges can be significant without becoming catastrophic. Understanding risks does not require assuming disaster. Instead, it requires recognizing reality and preparing thoughtfully. For ordinary Americans, preparation may involve strengthening personal finances, building emergency savings, reducing unnecessary debt, improving financial literacy, and maintaining a long-term investment perspective can all contribute to greater resilience. These actions may seem simple, but they become increasingly important during periods of economic uncertainty. Individuals cannot control national debt levels or global financial conditions, but they can influence their own financial foundations. Businesses face similar choices. Companies that manage debt responsibly, maintain strong balance sheets, and focus on long-term competitiveness are often better positioned to navigate challenging environments. Economic uncertainty tends to reward flexibility and discipline. Organizations that plan for multiple scenarios rather than assuming ideal conditions may be more resilient when unexpected events occur. Policymakers also face difficult decisions, balancing economic growth, fiscal responsibility, inflation control, and social priorities is never easy. Every policy choice involves trade-offs. The challenge becomes even greater when debt levels are high and public expectations remain elevated. Finding sustainable solutions requires both short-term management and long-term thinking. Dalio's central message is not that America is doomed. Rather, it is that warning signs deserve attention. History rewards those who recognize changing conditions before they become obvious to everyone else. The danger zone is a reminder that trends cannot continue indefinitely without consequences. Debt cannot grow faster than income forever. Asset prices cannot rise endlessly without periods of adjustment. Economic cycles do not disappear simply because we wish they would. What makes this moment especially important is that many of these pressures are converging at the same time. Financial markets remain sensitive to interest rates. Government debt continues to attract attention. Households face affordability concerns. Global competition continues to intensify. Technological change accelerates. Together, these forces create an environment unlike the one many investors became accustomed to during previous decades. The key question is not whether challenges exist. The key question is how individuals, businesses, and governments respond to them. History suggests that successful adaptation is possible. Nations have overcome significant obstacles before. Markets have recovered from major disruptions. New industries have emerged from periods of uncertainty. Progress often occurs precisely because societies are forced to confront difficult realities. As Ray Dalio sees it, America has entered a period where ignoring the warning signs may be increasingly costly. The danger zone is not a prediction of collapse. It is a signal that the margin for error is shrinking. Decisions made today matter more than ever. Whether the future brings stability, volatility, or transformation will depend largely on how these challenges are addressed in the years ahead. And that's why understanding the bigger picture is so important. The headlines may change every day, but the underlying forces shaping the economy often move much more slowly. Debt, demographics, productivity, innovation, and confidence are long-term drivers that influence outcomes over decades, not days. According to Ray Dalio, those long-term forces are sending a clear message. America has entered the danger zone, and the people who pay attention now may be far better prepared for whatever comes next.